Thanks for joining us on episode 1648 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Tommi Vincent. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to know you are worthy is key, and one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mater. I'm going to use my experience of being a thriving survivor of domestic violence. I was in a domestic violence relationship that culminated with the abuser lifting me up to throw me off of a bridge. In that moment, I knew I wanted to live.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's podcast episode, I interview Tommi Vincent. I asked Tommi about her book, The Table of Life. I also asked Tommi about why faith and food are intertwined for her. And Tommi also shares with you why her Stay a While podcast is all about using food as a tool for healing. I have a great book that's been out for a while now called Inspired Living. Assemble the puzzle of your calling by mastering your time, your talent, and your treasures. You can find out more about that book over at inspiredlivingbook.com. It'll take you to a page where there's information and you can sign up to get some mailings about it as well as purchase a copy there. I'd love to see you get a copy and share with me how it impacted your world. Tommi A. Vincent is a chef, speaker, and advocate dedicated to empowering women and ending domestic violence. A sought-after voice on resilience, leadership, and living with purpose, she helps women cultivate confidence and balance without the superwoman cape. Through her workshops, retreats, and Stay a While podcast, Tommi uses food as a tool for healing, inviting people to gather around the table to share stories, faith, and authenticity. Drawing from her own journey through trauma and depression, she brings hard-won lessons on grace, growth, and self-worth to every conversation. At home, Tommi treasures time spent with her husband, Troy, their children, and loved ones, creating new memories through their family initiative, Vincent Country. Welcome to the show, Tommi.
Thank you, Scott. I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So I talked a little bit in the intro about some of the work you do around empowering women, domestic violence. You got a podcast, a book, all of these different things. And yet I always think it's funny because intros kind of tell us the end of the journey, but they don't tell us the path to get there. So take us back in time a little bit and share a little bit more about your journey and what has brought you to the point where this is the work you feel called to do and the message you feel called to put out.
Thank you, Scott. So for me, the journey is everything because the journey is what sets the pathway for us to be able to really walk into what I believe to be what God is calling us to do or what he's chosen us to do on the earth. And so for me, everything that I have been able to accomplish today is a result of an experience that I had with a bout of depression. And I'm married now 32 years, and I have an amazing husband. I have 5 amazing children. And I spent many years investing in them, which was my greatest joy for a very long time. What I didn't realize in the process that it's also necessary to simultaneously make a self-investment and to make sure I'm doing things to cultivate myself and develop me and the various areas and giftings that are inside of me. And I was not doing that. As a result of that, along with, because that's not the only thing, as you live life, you have a lot of experiences and we tend to tuck stuff away. So tucking and not cultivating, I, the lights went out for me, or that's the way I describe it. The lights went out. And I went through therapy and a lot of prayer, came out on the other side. And when I emerged on the other side, I believe that this could not be only a situation isolated to me and how I navigated life. And so I wanted to make sure that I presented myself as a solution for other women to walk alongside them to navigate through life's terrain so that they could flourish and become everything that God created them to be. And so I became a certified life coach. I started women's retreats. I started a podcast, all the things so that I would have an opportunity to create spaces, to have conversations, to share bought sense because I already paid the price, and give women an opportunity to experience life through my lens, hopefully giving them an opportunity to see themselves in the process.
Mm-hmm. When, I think a lot of coaches have experiences that they go through that then comes out in the work they do in terms of kind of that feeling of, well, I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through. Do you feel like that was kind of some of the direction, or where was it coming from?
Well, I don't believe that I have the power to stop somebody from experiencing anything in life. Mm-hmm. Their life is their life. But what I can do is share my experiences. And people get to choose on how they take information that they receive and apply it or not to their lives. And so for me, it's just an opportunity to share. I believe that if we were to have more conversations, we realize that we are more alike than different, that we have similar experiences and we walk through similar pathways. Different, we might come from different regions. We might come from different backgrounds. We might have different cultural differences. All of that is relevant to who we are as a person. But when there's life at play, everyone experiences life in their space. And I think if we talk more, we would be a greater benefit to one another.
So one of the things I like to highlight on the show is sort of the intersection between our faith journey, whatever that is, and our life journey, and then how our life journey affects our faith journey. And, I kind of believe there's a feedback loop between those two things. For you, how has your life journey and your faith journey intersected and influenced each other?
You know what, Scott? I wouldn't even say there's an intersection. I would say that my faith is what is the foundation of my journey. So it is the road I walk on as I'm living. And everything I do, I filter it through my faith because it's important for me to have what my husband and I, we say, it's important to have non-negotiables in life, because if you don't have some type of filtration process, then you'll just be willy-nilly and going through life, and you might not always be making decisions that are in your best interest in evolving in who you've been created to be. So my faith is the foundation of everything. And it allows for me to choose opportunities and to also decline opportunities. It is something I use to walk through doors or to close doors. So it is extremely instrumental in everything that I do.
So you wrote a book called The Table of Life, and immediately, the table of life brings images to mind for people. Some people can think of family dinners. Some people think of tables as something not necessarily of, a good memory or a good experience as well. Mm-hmm. So why that? What brought about that message and that title, and why this book, I guess, is kind of the question.
So when I was growing up, I had my grandmother, her name was, I called her Nana Edie. And she had this kitchen that I likened to a water hole for the community. Everyone came by Miss Edie's, whether it was on their way to work or on their way home to work. She always had food on the stove, and there was enough for any and everyone that came in. And you could take a seat at her table. And really, no matter what you were experiencing outside of her kitchen and her table, it all melted away, and you had an opportunity to savor the flavors of life that she presented in that kitchen. And so as I was going through my healing journey and walking through the valley, coming out of my experience of depression, I kept seeing this table. And when I came out on the other side, one of the things that I did is I went to culinary art school, and I became a classically trained chef. And so everything that I do, I present the table before people, and I also love the opportunity to feed them. So I'm providing nourishment for their mind, body, and their soul. And so the book, The Table of Life, Nourishing the Soul with Food, Love, and Faith, it is me teaching others how to build their own table, one dish at a time, using all of the ingredients of their life. For me, it wasn't until I realized that every single ingredient in my life, I don't care what the experience has been, the worst and the best, it all makes me who I am today. And so the table is where you get to come and you get to sit and you get to eat, and you're able to be nourished and realize, you know what? By itself, this was horrific. But when you mix it all together and you create your one of a kind dish, it's actually all right.
Yeah, I think for me, my great grandmother, by the way, was the table that you're talking about, where everyone in the neighborhood came by. And I can remember having Thanksgiving dinner down there, and the family's there, but by the end of the day, 80 other people have, come through and gotten something to eat. It's like, where are all these people coming from? It's like, I don't know any of these people. Where are they coming from? And it was just all the folks in the neighborhood, and my grandfather worked in the oil field, and his other oil field workers or rednecks that were down there or whatever. It was just people. But as a young child, that was weird. Looking back on it now, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. But as a little kid, because I was pretty young at that point, it was like, this is kind of weird. But yeah, anyway, so that was kind of that same. I have a similar memory or similar experience with food and with the sharing of the table, which I think brings me to kind of the next question. And you just touched on it a little bit, but I want to give you a chance to unpack it a little bit more. Why is food useful to think about as a metaphor for how we relate to other people, to our life, to our faith? For you, why is that a metaphor that you see power in?
Everybody eats. So it's something that everyone can relate to. It doesn't matter where you are in the globe. We need food to survive. And so everyone can relate to, and they can consider a table. They can consider ingredients that are required to make a dish. And so because it is such a big part of who I am, and it was such a major part of my healing journey, it's like, this is what I liken it to. When musicians, they're able to pull notes together and they create this masterpiece, right? They compose this music. I look at ingredients and I'm able to pull them together and create these recipes. That creation also, I believe, is a gift that God gave me to use a recipe to also teach life lessons. And so it's relatable to every single person that walks in this earth.
Yeah, my wife gets mad at me when I cook, because about half the time she's like, "This is really good. Could you cook this again?" I'm like, I'm not sure. It kind of depends. do we have the same stuff in the refrigerator when I start cooking? Because I just started digging around, going, well, this will go good together.
You just cooking. You cooking from your soul. You're cook. It's called, that type of cook is called a dump cook. That's what my grandmother was.
Yeah,
that's how I am as a cook, and it's one of those things where you just feel it, you know it, you see it, a pinch of this, a pinch of that. But that's how we got to tinker in life. We got to figure out what is the recipe. Maybe it's not that the sugar is bad. It's just we're adding too much sugar. So we got to take a little bit of that out. Maybe our ambition is not bad. We got to pull back a little bit so that we don't allow for our ambition to sabotage what it is that we're looking to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you a question so you've been trained as a chef, you have that experience. And then like you've talked about, you also have that experience of a dump cook. I love that expression, by the way. I'm going to steal it and tell my wife, I'm just a dump cook. That's what,
You're a unicorn.
She's going to say, no, you're a dump truck. That's what you are. But that's a whole other conversation. But as a chef, what do you think? And I'm literally writing this question in my head as I ask it, but what do you think people miss when they come to, and this may actually be part of the metaphor part, and it may just be about food and cooking. I'm not sure yet. So go wherever you want to with it. But
okay.
What do people miss when they think about food and preparation and those sorts of things that somebody with the training and the understanding that somebody like a chef has can look at and see maybe differently? Does that make sense? I'm not sure if my question makes sense.
It does make sense. And so as a classically trained chef, when I went to culinary art school, there was terminology that was being used for techniques I learned from my grandmother. Mm-hmm. And she was not using that language. So it was like, oh, this is just gravy. But, they're naming the different types of sauces, the mother sauces, all these different kind of things. And so I knew how to do it. However, because I didn't have the language, if I wasn't in school learning, if someone would have said it, I would have thought, oh, I don't know how to make that. And I believe that people have more experience than they realize. But because we filter our life through a lot of other mediums and we're getting information from a lot of different places, we can count ourselves out because the language that's being used is not familiar. But if they were to break it down into layman's terms and just talk about it in general, you would get the epiphany of, oh, I do know how to do that. And so when cooking, a classically trained chef is going to be more technical, where someone like me and you as dump cooks, we're just going to get straight to it because we have a vision of what we want to accomplish and we're not afraid to just dump and pinch and pour to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, and I think, the metaphor there is obvious too, that I think a lot of times, and unfortunately, I think a lot of gurus and experts and teachers out there revel in using inside baseball language. I understand something that you don't understand because I know all these fancy words. When where a lot of times it's like, oh no. Actually, people have an intuitive understanding of that. Now, maybe they don't have the scaffolding or the tools or the language and that's where learning can do it, can help with that. But it's not, I think about meditation, even, going through the experience of learning meditation helps you label feelings that you weren't aware of. Not because you didn't have them, but because you weren't paying attention to them.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I think so. It's not that the education's bad, but it's sometimes it's used almost as a And I'm sure you see that in chefs too, that want to use it as kind of a shield of, I know more than you, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So when you think about the message that you put out, connect the dots from what we've been talking about with the table of life and cooking and food and all of these wonderful things, which I'll talk about food all day because I love food, but to kind of the message you put out around empowering women and ending domestic violence and resilience and leadership and all of those, the other dots in your message, draw the connection between those for us.
Mm-hmm. So I talked about how with, recipes, there are all of these ingredients that come together to complete the recipe. And I'm going to use my experience of being a thriving survivor of domestic violence. I was in a domestic violence relationship that culminated with the abuser lifting me up to throw me off of a bridge. And in that moment, I knew I wanted to live. I knew in that moment that I wanted to live. And so when I negotiated my way down from being picked up in the air to down, and I walked away from that situation. I didn't walk away unscathed, but I walked away with an experience that for a very long time, I did not consider how it impacted me. And I looked at that situation and I looked at everything that was wrong with it. And I never took the time to examine what was right with it. And so in the book, I talk about, when we're looking at situations, we tend to look at the darkness. And when you look at darkness, you can't see. But if you look to find the light, all of a sudden, everything opens up and you can see everything. And so when I am thinking about other women, I want them for their first instinct to not look for what is wrong. I want them to look for what is right, even in the hard things. Because in that situation, no one would have ever told me how resilient I would have become. No one would have ever told me how strong mentally my mental toughness developed. I walked away thinking I was stupid, thinking that it was somehow my fault, which is a lie. So I was believing all of these lies because I was focusing on the darkness. But once the light came on, all of a sudden I saw just how amazing and phenomenal of a woman I was. And so getting women to be able to see that, I believe, becomes a tool for them so that as they're moving through life and they're experiencing the hard things, because the fact is life is hard, but the truth is we can do hard things. And I demonstrated that. And in the book, I'm showing you that about my life and giving you an opportunity to reflect on your own life and say, wait a minute, I also have done many hard things. And this is what I gained from that experience. I'm not glorifying the experience. If I had to do it over again, I would not, but it happened. And now I got to figure out and find a way to move forward in life and not allow one moment in time or a period of time, a very isolated period of time, cause me to become stuck in my footsteps, preventing me from moving forward on this path that was laid for me to thrive on.
And I think for a lot of people, and you touched on this, the difficulty with that is it feels like if I look for the good in a bad experience, then I'm saying a bad experience was good. Somehow you're looking at the abuser and saying, oh, well, this was justified or this was good, when you said very clearly that's not, that's not what you're saying. Talk a little bit more about that, because I know that's somebody's got that thought in their head, and I want you to talk against it so that they don't keep it there.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that point, because no, that situation was not good, but I'm good enough. I'm worthy. So it's not about the situation nor the people who may be involved in a traumatic situation in your life, because we have zero control over any of that. But what I do have control over is me and how I choose to process information, how I choose to use what was meant to be harmful to me and turn it around so that it works for my good. All of that is in my control. And so by looking for the light in a situation, what I'm saying is that was horrific, but I'm worthy of the best that I can extract from that situation so that I can use even the most horrific times of my life, and I can use it as fuel for my rocket so that I can launch into whatever it is that God has for me.
Mm. Absolutely. So I've got a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests, but before I go there, is there anything else about your book or this work that you do that you'd like to leave with the listener?
Scott, I want to put a pin on what I just said, in that we're worthy. And and that may, there's sometimes language becomes so oversaturated in sound bites and in, especially like throughout social media, where you say these things and it's like cliche, but literally we're worthy. And in my faith, I subscribe to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so for me, when I say you're worthy, it is evident in him choosing to die so that we might live. And so not only die, but to be raised again and, seated at the right hand of the Father. And so for me, when I say that, it's because what he did demonstrates that I'm worthy. It's not anything, I don't have to do anything else in life. But what I do need to do is own that, my worthiness, because that allows for us to take all of those ingredients from our life, to create this amazing dish, and to build a table, not only where we're nourished, but we're also in a position to pull up some more chairs, to put a leaf in, extend the table, and give other people an opportunity to come take a seat and be nourished at the table that we built as well.
So my brand is Inspired Stewardship, and I kind of run things through that lens of stewardship. And yet I've discovered over the years that that's one of those words that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So for you, when you hear the word stewardship, what does that word mean to you?
Stewardship to me is how I'm managing what I've been given, responsibly or irresponsibly, multiplying it or subtracting from it. So to me, that's what stewardship is.
So this is my favorite question that I like to ask everybody. Imagine for a moment that I could invent this magic machine. And with this machine, I could take you from where you are today and transport you into the future, maybe 150, maybe 250 years. And through the power of this machine, you were able to look back and see your entire life, see all of the ripples, all of the connections, all of the impacts you've left. What impact do you hope you've left in the world?
I hope that the impact that I've left in the world is so powerful that people started at one point, and as a result of the impact that I had on their life, they were catapulted beyond anything they could ever think or imagine in a positive way.
So what's on the roadmap? What's coming next as you continue on this journey?
I'm going to continue to, as part of my book, The Table of Life, one of the things that I do is I go around the nation and I have dinners where we talk the book, and I also chef for the guests that join me at the table. And it is my way of what I consider to be a book tour that has now turned into a part of what I do as an offering. So it's been wonderful. And I'm going to continue to do that to impact as many women as possible. And I'm going to continue to do it in a very intimate way because I want to make sure that I can engage with them and we can talk about things that matter and they have an opportunity to stay a while.
So you can find out more about Tommi Vincent over at TommiV.com. And of course, that's Tommi with an I. I'll have a link to that over in the show notes. So in case you can't find it or you're driving right now and can't write it down, you can check it out on the show notes and you'll find a link there. Tommi, what else would you like to share with the listener?
I would like everyone to know that they can find the Table of Life. They can find it on my website, as Scott just mentioned, at TommiV.com, or they can purchase it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And on social media, my handle is at Chef Tommi, and that's TOMMIV. And you can find me on all social media platforms using that handle.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciated our conversation today.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor. Go over to inspiredstewardship.com/iTunes rate, all one word, iTunes rate. It'll take you through how to leave a rating and review and how to make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get every episode as it comes out in your feed. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.